Well, hi there, everybody. I wanted to do a really quick video here to sort of get us all pumped up for the opening of the Major League Baseball season. If you haven't been paying attention, tomorrow on March 20th at 3 in the morning Pacific time, or for me about 6 in the morning Eastern time, the Dodgers and the Padres will meet each other in South Korea. Now, you're probably looking at this and thinking, why in the world are they playing a game in South Korea? You may or may not remember this. Back around like 2008 or so, there was a series of opening day games played in Japan. I can remember the Mariners, I think it was, playing against Oakland in Japan once or twice back in 2008. And I remember waking up early and watching that on television and being actually quite excited for that. I was still in college back then. Boy, that feels like it wasn't that long ago, and it really was. So we're going to have sort of a similar experience. I'm going to try to be up early. 6 in the morning really isn't that out of the ordinary for me. And I'll see how much of those games I can watch. I think it's a pretty good way of getting into this season. But thinking about this made me remember a story I have. I apologize, I don't have any photos of this. Back in 2012, my family and I were living in Shenyang, China. Those of you who know us, and those of you who don't but are learning, my wife is originally from Taiwan. So we would go down to Taiwan for vacation pretty frequently. Our two oldest children were pretty young at that time. And going from China to Taiwan was pretty nice, but I was interested in going to South Korea. I speak Korean, and I'm interested in learning more about the society. I've never actually lived in Seoul that long. And so we decided to take advantage of the so-called Golden Week in China, the national holiday at the beginning of October. We spent, I think it was about a week and a half in Seoul, and got one of those, it wasn't really a hotel, it was sort of like an apartment type hotel, a little suite. And we spent some time there and went around and enjoyed the sights and did just a bunch of normal things. We went to a couple of museums, but most of the time we'd hang out at parks or have the kids go play in playgrounds. Our kids were so small then. I mean, like 2, 1, you know? It was a real interesting experience. Especially interesting for me to take orders from my wife in Chinese and try to translate them into Korean using my Korean skills, which were quite limited at the time. But we managed to survive one way or another. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because one of the days that we were there, I remember being on the subway, going home from something and noticing that like more people than usual had their cell phones out and were watching something. And I went around and kind of looked over people's shoulder. I swear more than half of the subway was watching baseball. It turns out they were watching the baseball playoffs, and I'm pretty sure it would have been game 1 of this playoff series. I'll show this to you here real quick. I know this page is in Korean, my apologies. 2012년 한국 프로야구 postseason. So, I mean, you can kind of understand what that means, right? And it was... I think it was this game that people were watching, this 10-inning affair. I was trying to look at this to figure out if I could see what time the game started. It looks like this isn't quite a normal box score. In fact, none of these are, unfortunately. But I'm pretty sure that this is the game that people were watching. I wasn't paying that much attention at the time. I mean, to be honest with you, I was paying a lot more attention trying to like make sure that my children were, doing what they're supposed to. Oh, here you go. It's at 6 o'clock in the evening when it started. That makes sense because I think we were coming home right around that time. I mean, I don't know much about the teams in the South Korean League. I know there was an 8-team league then. I think it probably still is now. As is the case in Taiwan and Japan, the leagues are closer, or the teams are more aligned with major companies than with cities, and they're not really corporations into themselves, as is the case in American sport. There's a bunch of other things that are slightly different. People will talk about the quality of play and stuff, and I know that a lot of those complaints are probably necessary. But that's not really the point of this, right? The real point that I want to make is that so many people were watching this. This included young people. This included both men and women, right? I mean, everybody. I saw girls who must have been in their, early 20s at the oldest who were watching this on their cell phones. Of course, I saw older people as well, and I think some younger kids as well doing the same thing. I was amazed by this, right? Because I've never seen that in the United States. So when we're talking about having opening day take place like in another country and far away from home in a different tradition and stuff, and we look at it and we think, oh, isn't this awful? Isn't this horrible? What are they doing to our sport? I really think we've got to keep this sort of thing in mind. I mean, like, it may seem strange to us from time to time, but especially for the good of the game, there are markets out there that Major League Baseball has not fully tapped. Now, I remember back in 2008 after the Olympics in China, because we were in China not long after that ended, I remember reading the articles about, oh, baseball is going to become something big in the People's Republic of China and on, and it never happened. You know why it didn't happen? I'll tell you, because there's no fertile ground there, right? Whereas basketball was a popular sport in China during the Cultural Revolution, baseball was banned, right? Because it was Japanese, right? So they didn't want to have anything to do with it, right? And it's kind of hard to come around a couple decades later and try to change everybody's thinking, right? It's not really a good investment of money. I don't think the Major League Baseball's executives were well advised when they made that decision. South Korea, however, is a lot different. Taiwan is different. Japan is different. Those are the countries that baseball really should be focusing on in Asia. That's the place where you're going to see a lot more long-term growth and where you have a lot more potential, right? There's a lot of other things to talk about, right? I know as well as you do that there are problems with Major League Baseball teams swooping into Japan, taking the best players away and leaving the league to be sort of like quadruple A. South Korea is in even worse shape, and Taiwan is like somewhere between probably single and double A, right? Those are not great things for the development of the sport in the country, and it's not necessarily a great thing to have all the great players in the United States. If I had my way, instead of Major League Baseball trying to expand to like Nashville or Salt Lake City, I would say, no, what you should do is you should establish a team in Tokyo. You should establish a team in Seoul. You should establish a team in Taipei, right? We should have Major League Baseball push to the east, make the World Series an actual World Series, and try to turn this into a global sport. That's what I would do if I were in charge. Of course, I'm not in charge of anything. I'm barely in charge of my own life, so there you have it. But that's the way I would recommend them treating the game instead of keeping it very myopic and American. Let's have teams in Mexico. Let's try to have a team in the UK. Let's do what we can to get the sport to grow in places where we know that it is popular or people are actually interested in it, instead of going over the same, old ground in the United States time and time again. We could probably talk about this till the cows come home. But personally, for me, I think it's a really, really good thing for baseball to have these opening days abroad and to try to get the brand to spread more to new audiences, right? So many South Koreans that I know will watch baseball, but they care only about their compatriots and watching South Korean players. Similar thing with the Japanese, who, of course, will watch a lot of Japanese players in the majors. It is okay. It's okay to have, sort of this nationalistic pride and focus because it's something. It's a way in. You can still get into the market and you can still start tapping the market. And you'll find that as time goes on, especially younger generations of people will become interested in people who are not of their own nationality and will start getting into the hype and getting into the wonder of the season. I really think that this, in the end, is a net positive for baseball, and I think it's the sort of thing that we should welcome. So that's my opinion. I'd love to know what you guys think about it. As always, let me know down below. I'm interested to know what you think. Like I said, I'm gonna be up early. I'll be watching this game. I won't have a chat or anything on. Sorry about that, because I probably have to do my real job too. But drop me a line. Let me know, especially if you watch it or not, what you think about all this stuff, and I'll talk with you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.